welcome to the deep dive. We're here to take the sources you're interested in and, well, really pull out the core knowledge for you.
That's the goal.
Today, we're diving into the Encyclical Fratelli Tutti. Our mission, really, is to give you a clear grasp of its key ideas on fraternity and social friendship, especially relevant for today's world. We're working from the excerpts you sent over.
Right. And it's worth noting it comes from a Christian perspective, but it's framed very much as a conversation starter for, well, everyone, all people of goodwill.
Absolutely. So where do we even begin with this?
Well, what jumps out almost immediately is the historical context. It reaches back centuries, actually, to Saint Francis of Assisi.
Saint Francis, okay.
He had this really quite extraordinary view for his time. He basically told his followers, even when dealing with people of different faiths, avoid conflict, avoid hostility.
Really? Back then?
Yes. Prioritize a kind of humble fraternal approach, not compromising their own beliefs, but focusing on, well, being brothers. A truly radical idea.
Okay, let's just unpack that for a second. 800 years ago, right? In a world that was pretty much constantly in conflict.
Exactly.
And Francis isn't pushing doctrine here. The encyclical really emphasizes his core message, summed up as God is love. His whole thing was spreading that.
That love, yeah. Not imposing dogma.
Which the text suggests made him this sort of father figure to all kinds of people. He envisioned this fraternity even when things were, incredibly violent and unequal.
He chose inner peace, didn't he? Rejected power, wanted to be with the poor, sought harmony. You can see why that spirit really infuses this whole document.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So that's the deep historical root. What about the immediate trigger?
Well, the timing is incredibly significant. It was written just as the COVID-19 pandemic unexpectedly hit the world.
Right. A huge global shock.
And the encyclical sees that not just as a health crisis, but as this stark reminder. It exposed just how fragile everything was, how vulnerable we all are together.
And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Despite being, more connected technologically than ever before.
Super connected, yeah.
The pandemic showed this, like fundamental inability for nations to actually work together effectively on a shared crisis.
Total fragmentation made it so hard to find real solutions.
The encyclical basically says, if we think the only lesson is just tweaking the systems we already have,
yeah,
we're missing the point.
Completely.
It exposed this weird paradox. All these digital links, but no real social or political structure for genuine global cooperation when it mattered most. A massive gap.
And following right on from that, the encyclical points to some, well, quite worrying signs of regression, things moving backwards.
How so?
We're seeing old conflicts flare up again, conflicts you might have thought were, settled history. And at the same time, there's this growth of what was a kind of myopic, extremist, resentful, even aggressive nationalism.
It does feel like a step back sometimes, doesn't it? Like certain ideas are promoting national unity, but really it's just fostering new kinds of selfishness.
That's exactly the argument. It's presented as defending national interests, but it actually erodes that broader social responsibility.
And the text reminds us that things like goodness, love, justice, solidarity, they aren't automatic. They don't just stick around.
No. Each generation has to actively work for them. We can't just coast on past progress, especially with so much suffering still happening.
Right. Which leads to another critical point it makes about opening up to the world.
Yes, how that phrase has been sort of co-opted.
Co-opted.
The encyclical argues it's been largely taken over by economic and financial interests. It almost exclusively means opening up for foreign investment now.
Without enough thought for the local impact or the common good.
Precisely. So this global economy, driven by profit, can end up exploiting local problems or trying to impose one single cultural model everywhere.
And the result, we end up being like neighbors geographically, maybe, because the world is smaller.
But not really brothers or sisters, not fostering that deeper connection.
We risk becoming more isolated, even as the world gets more crowded. Individual interests first.
It creates these markets where people are just consumers or bystanders. And this kind of globalism, it often just makes the strong stronger and weakens those already vulnerable.
A tough assessment. So this really sets the scene for some of the core themes, doesn't it? Where does it go from here?
Well, one of the first big themes it tackles is what it calls the loss of historical consciousness.
Loss of history.
Yeah, this sense that our connection to the past is weakening. And it links this partly to something called deconstructionism.
Deconstructionism?
Yeah.
Like tearing things down.
Sort of. The idea that human freedom means we can just create everything fresh, start from zero, ignore what came before.
That sounds risky, dismissing the past entirely.
The encyclical warns it can leave young people feeling unrooted, shallow, maybe distrustful, and that makes them easier to manipulate.
Manipulate how?
By ideologies that want to flatten out differences to gain power. They need people who disregard history, who ignore the wisdom built up over time. It's like saying, tear down the old ways, we'll build something totally new, but without learning any lessons.
And that ties into cultural colonization.
Directly. The text warns that societies giving up their own traditions, maybe wanting to imitate others, or maybe through violence or just apathy, they risk losing their spiritual identity, their moral compass, and eventually even their independence intellectually, economically, politically.
It's a subtle kind of control. And it mentions twisting words.
Yeah, a really effective tactic.
Yeah.
Take big words, democracy, freedom, justice, unity, and hollow them out.
Or twist them.
Exactly. Turn them into just labels to justify anything, tools for domination.
Wow. Okay. That's another key insight.
The idea of lacking a plan for everyone, it talks about how despair and discouragement are often used as tools of control.
How does that play out?
You see it in politics today, right? The hyperbole, the extremism, the polarization. It's often used as a weapon.
It does feel toxic sometimes.
Uh,
The main strategy seems to be just tearing down the other side.
Ridicule, suspicion, constant criticism, denying the other person even the right to have a different view.
Their values get rejected, any truth they might hold. It just impoverishes everyone, really, and empowers the loudest voices.
Political debate shifts away from finding common ground towards, slick marketing campaigns just designed to discredit opponents. Constant conflict.
And that makes it hard to, as the encyclical says, raise our sights, to see beyond the immediate fight.
Exactly. To see our neighbors, help those in need. The whole idea of a big, ambitious plan for the good of the whole human family starts to seem, almost naive in that kind of climate.
And this failure to see and care for others, that leads straight into this concept of a throwaway world, doesn't it?
It does. The idea that some parts of humanity are just seen as expendable, sacrificed for the benefit of others who are considered more valuable.
Where does that come from?
Fundamentally, it's about devaluing the human person. Especially, the text points out, the poor, people with disabilities, the unborn, the elderly, seen as not yet useful or
longer needed.
That's harsh. It is. And the encyclical connects this to wastefulness in general, starting with, the sheer amount of food we throw away.
But it goes beyond food waste.
Much further. It argues we're actually throwing away human beings. We saw it tragically during the pandemic with the elderly.
The isolation, the neglect in some cases.
And the encyclical suggests this wasn't entirely new. It happens in other ways too, like during heat waves. Isolating the elderly doesn't just hurt them. It damages families, cuts off younger generations from their history, their wisdom.
This disregard for life, for dignity, it naturally leads to the next issue. Insufficiently universal human rights.
Right. The massive contradiction between saying everyone has equal dignity
and the reality of ongoing injustice we see everywhere.
Precisely. Respect for human rights is supposed to be the foundation for progress, right? But the encyclical looks around and asks, is that equal dignity we talked about decades ago actually real everywhere? Is it respected, protected, promoted?
And the answer seems to be no.
Clearly no. So many injustices continue, fueled by narrow views of what it means to be human, and by economic systems built purely on profit. Systems that exploit, discard, even kill people.
The gap is stark. Some live in opulence, while others are denied basic dignity, their rights trampled.
So the question hangs there. Are these rights really universal in practice, or just on paper?
Moving from rights to security. The encyclical talks about conflict and fear, how we judge conflicts.
Yeah, it observes that things like war, terrorism, persecution, they're often assessed based on economic convenience. Meaning, is it good for those in power? Yes, okay. If it becomes inconvenient, then it's condemned.
A cynical view.
But maybe a realistic one. Tragically, it argues these violent situations are now so common, they basically add up to a kind of third world war being fought piece by piece, fragment by fragment.
A global war in installments.
And it says this shouldn't shock us, given how those shared values, that common vision we once had, have eroded.
And the first casualty is?
Humanity's call to fraternity. That's the first thing lost in any war. So every threat just breeds more mistrust, makes people pull back into their own little safety zones.
It's a strange situation. We think we can find security through fear and suspicion.
A false security, the text says. And despite all our technology,
We're still dealing with ancient fears.
deep-seated primal fears, fear of the unknown, the other, the barbarian. And sometimes technology actually amplifies these fears, hides them.
So we build new walls.
Exactly. Not just physical walls, but walls in our hearts, in our minds. And this isolation, it dehumanizes people, turns them into just others.
And the irony.
Those who build the walls end up trapped inside them too, cut off from broader perspectives.
This ties into the next theme, doesn't it? The illusion of communication. More connected, but
paradoxically, also seeing rising intolerance and less privacy with so much surveillance.
the Encyclical is critical of digital hate campaigns, right?
Very. It argues they're often not about real support, but just ganging up against a common enemy. These online spaces can lead to addiction, isolation, a disconnect from, tangible reality.
It hinders real relationships, the kind that need face-to-face interaction.
Exactly. Physical presence, body language, shared silence, all those things get lost.
And this digital world also gives a platform to, well, extreme views.
Ideologies that maybe wouldn't have gotten much airtime before, and there are huge economic interests involved online too.
Interests that can manipulate things.
Subtly, yes. Manipulate opinions, democratic processes. Many platforms create echo chambers, shielding people from different views, making it easy for fake news and hatred to spread like wildfire.
And sadly, it points out this isn't just secular groups. Destructive fanaticism can show up even among religious believers online.
Including within Catholic media, it specifically notes where basic respect and ethics can get thrown out the window.
Which makes you ask, how does that build fraternity?
A very pointed question. And it leads to the problem of information without wisdom.
Okay, what does that mean?
In the digital age, reality itself can be constructed, disguised, altered. We get filtered information, keeping us in our own virtual bubbles.
And we lose something important.
We lose silence, attentive listening. It's all replaced by this frenzy of texting, constant updates. It risks undermining how we actually communicate wisely as humans.
So it's a shift from deep thinking to just scrolling.
Yeah.
Quick searches.
Right. The Encyclical insists true wisdom doesn't come from a quick Google search or unverified info. It needs time, quiet reflection, maybe even struggle and difficult dialogue.
A far cry from the speed of online life.
Which often prevents that kind of serene thought and shared understanding.
Another area it explores is forms of subjection and of self-contempt. Sounds serious.
It is. It talks about how rich countries can be held up as the only cultural model for less developed nations.
That stops them finding their own path.
It can hinder their own unique ways of developing, innovating. And worse, it can foster this really damaging low national self-esteem.
Wanting to just copy others instead of building on your own strengths.
Exactly. And destroying that self-esteem can be a deliberate tool of control. Powerful interests impose a new culture that mainly benefits them, the elite.
And ignoring the local culture.
Makes development plans ineffective. They just don't fit. Ultimately, the Encyclical says the worst kind of alienation is feeling completely uprooted, like you belong nowhere.
That's a bleak picture. But the Encyclical does offer hope, right?
Absolutely. Despite all these challenges, it points to hope amidst darkness. And think about the pandemic again.
Okay.
Amidst all the tragedy, there was this renewed appreciation for essential workers, people who literally put their lives on the line for others.
That was powerful. A reminder of our interdependence.
A huge reminder. No one is saved alone. We're all connected.
And the Encyclical warns us not to forget that lesson too quickly, not to just slide back into consumerism and self-protection.
Precisely. The hope is that this shared vulnerability could actually shift our whole perspective, move us away from us versus them.
Towards a genuine sense of us, rediscovering that we're all in this together.
And to really drive home this idea of connection and caring for others, the Encyclical uses a very famous story, the parable of the Good Samaritan.
A classic. Even if you're not religious, you probably know it.
Right. It emphasizes its timeless relevance. It starts with that lawyer asking, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And crucially, who is my neighbor?
And the story unfolds. The man beaten and left for dead. The priest walks by. The Levite walks by.
Both presumably concerned with their duties, their status, but then the Samaritan comes along.
An outsider in that context.
Exactly, but he's moved with compassion. He doesn't just feel sorry, he acts. Bandages the man, takes him to an inn, pays for his care, practical help.
And the Encyclical throws the question right back at us, doesn't it? Yeah, which one are you?
Directly. Which character do you identify with? It admits it's a constant temptation for all of us to just ignore the vulnerable. It even talks about our collective illiteracy in caring for those who need help.
Ouch. Illiteracy and caring.
It's a strong phrase. And it underlines that the call to love isn't just for our friends or family, it's for one another and for all, including strangers.
So the parable shows that love cuts across origins, builds bridges.
Builds bridges, yes. Creates one big human family, grounded in compassion and dignity. Again, the challenge is clear. Who are you in this story? Don't be the robbers. Don't be the ones who just look away.
And it makes a sharp point about those robbers often having, like, secret allies.
The ones who pass by and look the other way. They benefit from the system, even if they criticize it publicly.
There's a hypocrisy there.
Mm-hmm.
Letting crime happen while maybe criticizing things loudly in a way that just sows distrust and despair.
Which actively hinders real solidarity and generosity.
The encyclical then flips the perspective, reminding us we all feel like that injured person sometimes.
We do. And it critiques how our globalized society often keeps suffering at arm's length. We watch it on the news, but don't really engage.
But there's hope even there.
Yes, the possibility of starting small, locally, just like the Samaritan did, expanding that circle of care outwards from where we are.
And Jesus' redefinition of neighbor is key here.
Absolutely transformative. It's not just who lives near you or who's in your group. It's about actively becoming a neighbor to whoever is in need.
Regardless of their background, like the Samaritan helping the Judean groups, often hostile to each other.
Exactly. The challenge is to put aside our differences, our prejudices, and just approach the suffering person. No questions asked initially.
For Christians specifically, what's the extra layer?
The encyclical stresses that Jesus' words compel Christians to see Christ himself in the abandoned, the excluded. Faith isn't just belief. It inspires deep respect for everyone because you recognize God's infinite love and the dignity God gives to every single person.
This leads to an interesting concept. The law of ecstasis. What's that?
Ekstasis, meaning standing outside oneself. Love, true love, naturally pulls us out of ourselves towards others.
So it requires moving beyond just our comfortable, limited relationships.
Yes. Authentic love, real friendship, they grow through that openness. It's the opposite of just interacting with people who are basically reflections of ourselves.
And this love, or charity, has a unique power.
When it's infused by God, the encyclical argues, it's essential. It helps direct all our other good qualities, our virtues correctly. It fosters that genuine openness and unity.
Without it, virtues might just be superficial.
Appearances, yeah. Not strong enough to really hold a community together. Ultimately, it says, a person's spiritual stature, their real worth, is measured by love. That's the final test.
And this love isn't static. It's meant to be ever more open.
Constantly pushing us towards universal communion. We can't truly grow if we stay closed off. Love demands we keep expanding our ability to accept others.
Seeing everyone as potentially part of our circle.
Right. Seeing every periphery, every margin, as capable of moving towards the center of mutual belonging. Remembering Jesus' words, you are all brothers.
This openness isn't just about geography, is it?
No, the encyclical clarifies it's existential. It's about consciously broadening our concern to include people right next to us who we might not naturally think of as our people.
It mentions the existential foreigner.
Yes, those who are marginalized within their own society. And it links this to racism, describing it powerfully as a virus that keeps mutating, finding new forms.
Going back to the Good Samaritan again.
It contrasts the priest and Levite caught up in their roles and status with the Samaritan. He was free from those labels.
So he could just act as a neighbor.
Exactly. And it asks, how does that story hit us today? In a world full of groups clinging to their own identities, where maybe neighbor loses its meaning, and we just have associates, people we deal with but don't truly connect with.
Transactional relationships.
Instead of fraternal ones. And that leads to a core assertion. Social friendship, universal fraternity, they absolutely require us to acknowledge the worth of every single person.
Always and everywhere.
Always and everywhere. Just being born somewhere with fewer resources doesn't mean you deserve less dignity. It's a fundamental right for everyone to live with dignity and develop fully.
Regardless of productivity or limitations.
Regardless, it's inherent.
And this changes how we should think about property.
Profoundly. Because we all share this dignity, the world's resources are fundamentally for everyone. Differences in wealth or status can't justify some having privileges while others lack necessities.
So the community has an obligation.
A real obligation to ensure everyone can live with dignity and has opportunities. It even references early Christian thinkers who said withholding necessities from the poor is basically stealing from them.
Strong stuff, and this extends beyond borders.
Logically, yes. Rights shouldn't stop at the border. You can't be excluded just because of where you were born.
Just like gender shouldn't diminish rights.
Neither should birthplace. It calls for a whole new way of thinking about international relations, recognizing not just individual rights, but social rights, the rights of entire peoples.
Including things like the right to subsistence, progress, tackling foreign debt.
All of it. It's about a more just global structure.
This demands a heart open to the whole world, as it says, which needs concrete action, especially regarding immigrants.
Yes. The ideal is to create conditions so people don't have to migrate unnecessarily, dignified lives in their home countries.
But people still have the right to seek a better life elsewhere.
Absolutely. And the response to migrants should be summed up in 4 words: welcome, protect, promote, and integrate.
And it lists practical steps for doing that.
Yes, concrete actions for welcoming, ensuring safety, helping people develop their potential, and integrating them into the community. It calls for a global effort, a shared governance of migration.
It also frames the arrival of different people as a gift.
A reciprocal gift, yes, not a threat. An opportunity for enrichment for everyone's development. It really pushes back against seeing newcomers as suspicious.
Especially urging young people to see them as equals.
Right. Opening our hearts to difference allows us to develop too, while still cherishing our own culture. It's about avoiding cultural hardening, being open to new experiences. It gives examples of how immigration has historically enriched societies.
Another key concept is gratuitousness,
Yeah.
giving freely.
Exactly. Life without that element of selfless giving just becomes commerce, a series of transactions.
But that's not how God operates.
No, God's giving is free, so we're called to cultivate that ability too, to give without expecting payback. Echoing Jesus' teachings about charity: freely you received, freely give.
But this openness needs to be authentic, right? Not superficial.
Definitely. The Encyclical warns against a false openness that comes from, like, shallowness or maybe unresolved anger towards your own people.
So broaden your horizons, but don't get uprooted.
Precisely. Work locally, but keep a global perspective. It uses the image of a polyhedron, a shape with many distinct faces, all part of the same object.
Respecting individual value within the whole.
Exactly. It contrasts a healthy love for your own culture with local narcissism, being afraid of the other, building walls. Being truly local, it argues, means being open to the universal, seeing other cultures as reflecting the richness of humanity.
It also critiques certain political approaches, populism and liberalism.
Yes, it points out that a lack of real concern for the vulnerable can hide behind both populist slogans and certain liberal ideologies that primarily serve powerful economic interests. Both can hinder a world that's truly open to everyone.
It distinguishes between popular arising from the people and populist manipulative.
Yes, and it knows how some individualistic forms of liberalism can reject the very idea of the people as a positive community, sometimes attacking those who defend the vulnerable.
And charity connects the big picture with individual action.
Right. Charity unites the abstract need for change with concrete actions involving politics, social structures, individual choices.
So underpinning all of this is the primacy of love.
Absolutely essential. Building that global community of fraternity requires love. Love expressed as social friendship, commitment to the common good.
Individualistic thinking just won't cut it.
It's fundamentally inadequate for global challenges. Real charity, rooted in universal love, is vital for a healthy society.
And this love needs truth.
Yes, every commitment, all the social action inspired by these ideas flows from charity. That includes political action for a better world. Social charity means loving the common good.
And this social love can build a civilization of love, the best way to develop.
That's the argument. But crucially, charity needs the light of truth, both reason and faith, to be effective, to avoid just being relative or becoming rigid dogma.
So political charity is about
A preferential love for those most in need, recognizing their dignity, working to integrate them. It means actively fighting against human rights violations, marginalization, exclusion, trafficking, all those terrible things.
a call for politicians to step up.
A strong call, and also a call for respect.
How so?
To live and teach respect for everyone, welcome differences. Prioritize human dignity above ideas or opinions. Listen to different voices, because forced uniformity leads to decay.
It also reminds politicians they're people too, called to love in their daily lives.
Yes, not just seeing people as functions or numbers. And it emphasizes focusing on fruitfulness over just immediate results.
Meaning,
Meaning, even helping one single person makes the effort worthwhile. Acts of love aren't wasted. Place hope in the quiet power of goodness. Start processes even if you won't see the final results yourself. Let others reap the harvest.
that requires a certain kind of dialogue, doesn't it?
A specific kind. Dialogue, the encyclical says, isn't just talking at each other. It's approaching, speaking, listening, trying to understand, finding common ground.
Crucial for actually encountering people and helping each other.
Yes. And it contrasts this sharply with social media exchanges, often superficial, aggressive, just parallel monologues, really.
Authentic dialogue needs respect.
Fundamentally, respecting the other person's view, acknowledging they might have legitimate reasons for their beliefs, thinking consistently and arguing reasonably helps, but only if you're genuinely open to dialogue.
And public discussion, when it's not manipulated.
Can actually lead to a better grasp of the truth. It also calls for more communication between different fields of knowledge and sees potential in media for unity while warning against its bad uses.
It asks a deep question about law, doesn't it? Law without a belief in human sanctity.
Right. Can law really be just without that foundation? Society needs to respect the truth of human dignity. Truth here isn't just facts, it's the deeper reasons behind our laws and decisions.
Which requires recognizing some universal values, found through reason.
Yes. And dialogue in a diverse society helps us figure out what those enduring principles are beyond just what's popular right now. It acknowledges we can arrive at fundamental truths.
This all points towards building a new culture.
A culture of encounter, it calls it, defining life itself as the art of encounter.
Going beyond differences, using that polyhedron image again.
Exactly. Everyone has something to offer, especially those on the margins. They have unique perspectives. Social peace isn't about eliminating difference, but integrating it. It's slow work and needs to include even those we find difficult.
A key ingredient is kindness.
Recovering kindness, yes. It sees consumerist individualism as fueling injustice and aggression. Kindness is the counterforce.
It frees us.
From cruelty, anxiety, distraction, it can genuinely change the atmosphere, make consensus possible, a transformative power.
This requires paths of renewed encounter, healing wounds.
Yes, peacemakers are needed. People willing to start healing processes rooted in truth. This needs what it calls a penitential memory. Honestly facing the past, the injustices, but without letting it paralyze the future. Truth and justice are absolutely essential for peace.
And building social friendship means starting with
the least. Encountering the poor, the vulnerable, avoiding stereotypes. Real closeness lets you see their value. The option for the poor should lead to actual friendship with the poor.
Now, forgiveness and reconciliation are central, but it warns against misunderstandings.
Yes, warns against shallow ideas that could lead to apathy or letting injustice continue. It points out Jesus never advocated using force for power.
And forgiveness doesn't mean giving up rights.
Absolutely not. It doesn't mean letting oppression win. Real love fights oppression. You have the right to defend yourself, demand justice.
What about punishment for wrongdoing?
The focus should be on rehabilitation, seeing punishment as a way to heal and reintegrate, not just pure retribution.
And memory. What about forgetting past harms?
Forgetting is never the answer, it insists. It argues against demanding social forgiveness for huge injustices. Reconciliation is personal. But we must remember atrocities like the Shoah, the atomic bombings.
To prevent them happening again.
Exactly. Remember the horror, but also remember the acts of solidarity, the moments of fraternity that happened even then. Remember both.
So true forgiveness isn't forgetting.
No. It's choosing not to give in to hatred and revenge, breaking that cycle. But it absolutely does not mean impunity. Justice must still be pursued out of love for justice itself and respect for victims.
Then it tackles war and the death penalty directly. Calls them false solutions.
Unequivocally, solutions that just create more destruction.
War isn't a thing of the past.
No, it's a constant threat, fueled by broken relationships, power ambitions, fear, and it argues the risks of modern war always outweigh any potential benefits.
Making the idea of a just war.
Very difficult, maybe impossible to justify now. We don't have isolated wars anymore. It's that world war fought piecemeal. It quotes Pope John the 23rd. War is no longer a fit way to repair injustice.
And the death penalty.
Inadmissible. Full stop. The Church is committed to its abolition worldwide. States need to punish crime, yes. But the death penalty is unnecessary and unjustifiable today.
What about the role of different religions in building fraternity?
It emphasizes their positive contribution. Based on respecting human dignity, different religions can work together for fraternity and justice. Interreligious dialogue is key, aiming for friendship, peace, harmony, sharing values.
And the ultimate foundation for fraternity.
Belief in a common Father, a creator of all, that provides the solid ground. Reason alone, it suggests, can't fully establish it.
It quotes a warning: denying transcendent truth leads to.
The rule of sheer power, totalitarianism.
So believers have a positive role to play in society.
Yes, their witness, their sincere search for God benefits everyone. Denying religious freedom causes immense suffering. A dulled conscience and drifting away from religious values are major factors in modern crises.
But while respecting other religions.
The Encyclical affirms that, for Christians, the gospel of Jesus is the ultimate source, the wellspring of human dignity and fraternity.
How does it conclude this line of thought?
By reiterating that powerful joint appeal made with Grand Imam Ahmad al-Tayyib for peace, justice, fraternity, emphasizing the equality, rights, duties, dignity of all humans created by God, condemning violence and terrorism, and calling for action against their root causes.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe we should hold on to that example it gives of Blessed Charles de Foucault.
A powerful figure.
By identifying completely with the poorest, the most marginalized, his aspiration was to become the universal brother. It's quite a thought, isn't it?
Maybe
let that vision inspire you.
And perhaps we can end with the ecumenical Christian prayer included in the text. It's quite beautiful. O God, Trinity of love, from the profound communion of your divine life, pour out upon us a torrent of fraternal love. Grant us the love reflected in the actions of Jesus, in his family of Nazareth, and in the early Christian community. Grant that we Christians may live a gospel, discovering Christ in each human being, recognizing him crucified in the sufferings of the abandoned and forgotten of our world, and risen in each brother or sister who makes a new start.
Thank you. We really encourage you to keep reflecting on these themes: fraternity, social friendship, that challenge to be a neighbor to absolutely everyone. This has been The Deep Dive.